The JFK 35 podcast is produced by the JFK Library Foundation and made possible with the help of a generous grant from the Blanche and Irving Laurie Foundation.
JFK 35 is a production of the JFK Library Foundation. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of others at the JFK Library Foundation or the JFK Library, including staff, board, or donors.
I love that these items continue to be pieces that family members treasure and come in and use. I think it really adds life to the museum in that so many of the pieces have these stories behind them.
At the JFK Presidential Library Museum, history isn't frozen behind glass. Each artifact has its own story to tell. This episode, we talk with the JFK Library Foundation's Maggie Bramley about the museum items that continue to inspire her, from the Kennedy family Bible to a commode gifted to President and Mrs. Kennedy by French President Charles de Gaulle. Both are on display and highlights on her tours of the library. We'll take you inside next on JFK 35.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Hello, I'm Matt Porter. Welcome to our 15th season of JFK 35. The John F. Kennedy Presidential Library is home to more than 24 million documents, 500,000 photographs, 35,000 artifacts, and tens of thousands of audio and video recordings. Together, they tell the story of a president, a family, and an era that reshaped America. From drafts of historic speeches to rarely seen family photos, the library's collections reveal the personal moments and pivotal decisions that defined JFK's presidency. And this season, we're taking a look into the archives and museum collections. Each episode, we'll hear from staff members from the library and the foundation to share the items that inspired them most and the stories behind why they matter. Our guest this week is the JFK Library Foundation's Director of Individual Giving and New Frontier Network, Maggie Bramley. Maggie has been with the foundation for nearly 8 years. Maggie, I'm so glad you could be here. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Matt.
Well, we're so glad you could be here. Before we get into the items you've picked, just so that the audience can get to know a little bit about you and what you do here for the foundation, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, how you ended up here at the Library Foundation, and what you do for the foundation now?
Sure. I joined the foundation staff in August of 2018 as a consultant. I joined the development team to help with their year-end giving strategy and joined the staff in March of 2019 as the director of the New Frontier Network. The New Frontier Network is for people who have no living memory of President Kennedy, and it's really to advance his legacy and ideals to a new generation today. About a year and a half ago, I became the director of Individual Giving and New Frontier Network, so I now work closely with the annual fund, membership, and New Frontier Network programs here at the library.
So you have 3 items for us to talk about today. Let's start with what's sometimes called the silver bud vase, but not actually a vase. Tell us a little bit about this actual goblet, not a vase, and why you chose it and why it was meaningful to you.
Sure. So this silver bud vase or goblet was given to President Kennedy during his visit to Ireland in June of 1963. And it was in the White House corridor in a special exhibit of state gifts that were given during that visit in June of 2023, or the 60th anniversary of that visit. And the thing that I really liked about this bud vase is that upon returning to the White House, Mrs. Kennedy put it in the Oval Office, and she worked with the White House florists to ensure that a fresh stem was put into it every single day.
And can you tell us a little bit about what is actually a goblet, but Mrs. Kennedy used as a vase, what it looks like?
Sure. It's about 6 inches tall. It's sterling silver, and I would have never known that it was a goblet until I did a little bit of research after I really liked seeing it in this exhibit. And I really liked the idea that this was placed in the White House as a reminder of his trip to Ireland, and that it was used every single day from June until the end of his term.
Yes, which unfortunately wasn't much longer. There was that year, 1963. Thinking about the Ireland trip, before we get to your next object, which is also Ireland-based, but thinking about how meaningful that trip was, what stood out for you from the trip in Ireland that JFK took to see his ancestral homeland?
Well, I think it's really meaningful that all four of his grandparents immigrated from Ireland to the United States. And at the time of his visit in June of '63, Ireland was still a really, really new country. It was a very young country. And to have the President of the United States come to visit this country was very meaningful to the people of Ireland. And to have the President of the United States have direct connections to Ireland was also very, very meaningful. And I was really fortunate to travel to Ireland in 2023 with a group from the foundation to commemorate that trip to Ireland. And it was so interesting to see how much that visit still meant to the people in Ireland and how much people still reflected upon what that meant to that country at that time.
What was it like to follow JFK's footsteps on that trip?
It was very moving. The first day in Ireland, we had the opportunity to hear from a panel about what that visit had meant and what that visit continues to mean to that country. And then the second day, we heard from innovators who talked about how they had been inspired by President Kennedy and his moonshot speech, and how they had used that moonshot language in their work that they did today.
So staying with the theme of Ireland for the moment, we go to your second object, which is the Kennedy family Bible, which, if for people who haven't seen, it's displayed in the museum, and it's this very large book, very large ornate Bible. Why don't you talk a little bit about it and why it was your second choice to talk about today?
Sure. I really tried to pick things that people might just walk by as they visit the library. And the thing that I really like about this Bible is that it's tucked away in a case that's in the inauguration exhibit. And it's from 1850. It came with the Fitzgerald family as they emigrated to the United States. And it includes the key milestones of the Fitzgerald family and of the family members to this day. So it includes the marriage of Joe Sr. and Rose Kennedy in 1914. It includes the birth of all nine Kennedy children. And family members today can still come in and request to have that Bible taken out of the case so that they can include their milestones in the pages as well.
And how does that work? Do they just add new pages into the book, or?
I don't know the answer to that.
That's interesting.
I did learn that when family members come in, the library team takes the Bible out of the case and brings it up to the 7th floor to the president's room, where the family members can gather around and include their milestones.
Wow, that's amazing. And also some of the Kennedy family members who have political aspirations of their own take out the Bible to swear their own oath on the Bible, right?
I don't know that, but I know that President Kennedy used that Bible for his inauguration in January of 1961. And there's a funny story about how 2 Secret Service agents were sent to Dorchester to pick up the Bible from his cousin, who had been holding on to it. And they brought it back to D.C. in a paper shopping bag, which I look at it now in that case, and I can't imagine throwing that in a paper bag.
You know, you talk about how family members still come in and leave their milestones. What's it like to have an item that's sort of a living item there in the museum?
I love that these items continue to be pieces that family members treasure and come in and use. I think it really adds life to the museum in that so many of the pieces have these stories behind them. And I think the fact that family members are still able to come in and add their family milestones really adds to the family history and the story of the Kennedy legacy.
And speaking of the Kennedy legacy and Kennedys, the last item you chose, it's a rather big item. It is a large chest, often referred to as a commode, but it is a type of chest you would see in a living room, dining room. And it was given by French President Charles de Gaulle to the Kennedys. And Mrs. Kennedy, it was actually an artifact that she kept after the White House, but then has now ended up in the museum. Tell us a little bit about that and why was this special for you?
Again, like the Bible, this is something that somebody might walk by without really spending a lot of time looking at it. And it's in a case as you make the turn onto the White House corridor. And it's a beautiful 18th century mahogany and marble chest. It's called a commode. That was a gift to the Kennedys in May of 1961 during their historic trip to Paris. And Mrs. Kennedy loved this piece. When she returned to the White House, she had it installed in the private residence. There's a photograph on the wall that has this piece in it. And when Mrs. Kennedy left the White House, she asked for permission to take a few pieces with her that would remind her of their time in the White House. And this was one of the pieces she took. And I learned recently that this was installed in her apartment on Fifth Avenue in the foyer, and that it was in her foyer until she passed away, at which point it returned back to the Kennedy Library.
It has such history, these different pieces, whether it's the Bible commode or even the bud goblet vase that we've talked about today. Also, I think I should mention, we've mentioned the White House corridor a couple of times. For those of you who have not been in the museum, there is a moment in the museum where you turn and you basically have this recreation of the White House hallway where this commode appropriately lives. So just letting our listeners know what we mean when we say the White House corridor is a part of the museum. But now that I've kind of given that explainer, when you walk people through our museum, especially when you walk and turn into that White House corridor, what is it like knowing that you have these type of objects to share with potential donors or people who have no living memory of President Kennedy, which is part of your job at the New Frontier Network?
Sure. I love the White House corridor because our library team uses it as an opportunity to bring out items that wouldn't regularly be a part of the library exhibits. So the commode is, I believe, part of the permanent White House corridor exhibits. In 2023, there were items from the trip to Ireland, and currently there are items from President Kennedy's state visits to Latin American countries. And it's amazing to see the diversity of items that are here at the library, that are within the archives, and to have the opportunity to see them as a part of the exhibit and to hear the stories about them.
And how do you think having you kind of mentioned a little bit, but how do you think having all these items at your disposal helps you inspire others to be more active participants in the foundation and the library?
When you think about it, more than 80% of Americans have no living memory of President Kennedy or his administration. And so when you have the opportunity to give people a tour of the library, you have the opportunity to share with them not only the work that President Kennedy did during his time in office, but also bring it to life. And to be able to tell stories about these items that really add color and add detail as people learn more about his time in office and learn more about our 35th president.
Well, Maggie, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing what other inspirational objects you bring to the table next time.
Matt, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to our third episode in our special Staff Picks series. If you're interested in learning more about some of the items we discussed today, you can visit our podcast page for the episode. It includes links to photographs of all the items we mentioned today. If you have questions or story ideas, email us at jfk35pod@jfklfoundation.org or tweet at us at JFKLibrary using the hashtag JFK35. If you liked what you heard today, please consider subscribing to our podcast or leaving us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Have a great week.